say that, like any family that decides to start a foundation, and my father-in-law, Carl Freeman, believed in the Jewish idea of tzedakah, of giving back. And really, I have to give props to Cheryl, because Cheryl came into a family that was literally tabletop kitchen philanthropy, right? Around the kitchen, what are we gonna give? And she said, hold up, stop. We have to think about where we're giving, where it has impact, how much you wanna give, what you're required to give. And I think it got the family focused, really, and that's not easy to do. That's like herding cats, as you know. So I wanna say thank you, Cheryl. I also wanna say, you can tell a lot about people when you're in the worst parts of your life, where they stand. And so I'm grateful that in the saddest, darkest moments of my life, Cheryl Kagan stood beside me instead of across from me, which many of you know in this room. I've said to people, like, when a tragedy happens in your life, you will see people look at you as you come down the street, and many of them will cross to the other side of the street because mostly they just don't know what to say to you, and Cheryl was never part of that group. So I want to thank Allison Stearns for inviting me to come. I want to thank all of you. I have no idea what I'm going to say, I should say. You are catching me on the Thursday of Monday night. I had the great privilege and honor to co-chair the ADL's In Concert Against Hate at the Kennedy Center with my son, who's 31, and stand up on a stage that my father-in-law had graced many, many times, and my mother-in-law, Virginia Freeman, and speak about hate speech and anti-Semitism. And so I'm a little all over the place, admittedly, this morning. But I guess what I want to say, and I'm going to start my timer, because whenever you give an Italian girl the ability to just speak freely, who the hell knows where that's going to end up? So I'm going to make sure that I stay on time. I want to say that the lessons I've learned since December 14th, 2006, which admittedly I was making, I had a blended family, Christian and Jewish, so we did things like Hanukkah and made Christmas cookies. And we were making cookies that night when I got the phone call that my husband had been killed in a helicopter accident. I think the lessons that I've learned, and I tried to put into a TEDx talk that I did, was that you all know the secret of, is that that philanthropy, actually the greatest philanthropy, is public service. It's service to another human being. And I was raised in a home where we were talking about this this week, because someone who works for me for a very long time, who's part of the Latina community, lost her mother-in-law, and I went to the funeral, and she said, normally we would have had this in our home. And I was raised in an Italian immigrant family where the person was laid out in the living room, and we would walk around and have food. And this is, for me, where the respect of dying came from. That if you stood with somebody in their life, then you stood with them in their death, and that both pieces of that were important. That as I was with my mother's sister in the hospital as she was leaving this world, and a little nun came in, and she said, Michelle, and I was struggling, admittedly I was struggling, and she said, we struggle to come into this world and we struggle to leave it. And I remember what a rabbi said to me as we were getting ready to walk my husband up this hill. He said, as you do this work, as you get ready to walk him to his final resting place, that's the greatest mitzvah you can do for someone. So I say to you, as somebody who knows nothing and is not a spiritual leader or or just a girl from Wilmington, Delaware, who happened to marry the love of her life. I think in the times that we serve others, the secret really is that we receive more than anything. And I think that's the secret of philanthropy. And I remember as a a young girl in school, someone saying, we were talking about Mother Teresa at the time, and they said, why would somebody with such care and compassion and standing in the church go into the streets of India and serve the dying? And her response was, because that's where God is. In the dying is really where God shows himself or herself the most. And so after Josh died in 2006 with 3 kids, I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 15-year-old. I had a business. My therapist, I am a huge believer in grief therapy, huge believer that you have to gather around you people who love and care for you in that time, because I think it's like, I said to someone, it was like everything I had known and believed was going to be my future was ripped away from me in a minute. And so that new world where you were on December 13th, you're no longer on December 14th. And who you choose to be in those moments, and little eyes, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 15-year-old looking at you, I think you pull into your soul and you say, how am I going to stand here? What am I going to do? Who am I going to be? What example am I going to give them? And the example that I chose to give them is that it's not always pretty. You don't always have makeup on and look perfect. You will never be the same. I don't think you are ever the same, but you do move forward. You never move on from loving that person, from caring about that person. I personally feel like, which is a little crazy, I guess, that people say, really? I say that I have this spiritual army on the other side. I've lost my mother and father-in-law, Josh Freeman, and it's okay, it's all right. Don't, everybody's face is like, oh no, it's all right, it's okay. I feel like I have this spiritual army on the other side saying, keep doing what matters. Life matters, but keep doing the philanthropy, keep giving back. Here's the other thing I'll say about us as funders, because I'm looking at Allison. I think every funder, and saying this to you all, every funder just wants to know that the dollar that they're giving is going to make impact and affect people's lives. And I want to say to you, Allison, that what you can be assured of is that this is a living, breathing piece, a living, breathing, connection to your mission, and that you're performing on that every day is what I think. And so I look out and say, as a philanthropist, what more would you want? My kids have put the secession music on my phone, which is awful when you think about it. Awful, secession. So just that, I've been speaking for 6 minutes, that if anybody's sitting in this room and you're thinking about what dollar do I give, how do I give it, it's connecting those dollars to mission and affecting people's lives and impact. And that's all that matters as a philanthropist. I want to say thank you to the volunteers, thank you to people like Cheryl Kagan and board members. I know that there's a million things that you can give your dollars to, that you can give your time to, that you can stand up for and champion. And I think the fact that you all stand with people in their darkest time, in their scariest time, in their most vulnerable, is extraordinary. And I will say that I think there's this place where giving and serving changes our soul. And I think it's interesting that my life has led me here because I lost Joshua Freeman. And I think there's some of you that probably understand, in my faith, I believe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be with you all. Doesn't mean that I would want or wish for him to ever leave. I'd take it back in a second if I could give everything back just for a minute with him, just for a minute. But there is some understanding that we all end up exactly where we're supposed to be. And so I want to thank you for the work you do. I want to thank you for standing in the abyss with people, with clients, with people who are afraid. I think like Mother Teresa, that is where the spirit is. And I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. Keep giving where you're giving. And the Carl Freeman Foundation is grateful to be a part of it. Thank you. Thank you.